Alison, you're very welcome to the Bell Tell.
Thanks for having me.
Tuesday, as we speak now, this is Wednesday afternoon. We heard from the state pathologist. He said that Natalie suffered a sustained, prolonged assault, and in fact that it took him a considerable amount of time to detail all of the injuries. And just a warning to any listener, this is distinctly unpleasant.
Well, look, as you say, today is Wednesday. I have just come out of a very long day in court, but let's go back to yesterday, to what the state pathologist said first. So it was another lengthy day's evidence, a very harrowing day's evidence as well. And the state pathologist, Dr. James Linus, was the key witness, I suppose, for today. Bear in mind, this is still the prosecution case. We haven't yet came to the defence. Stephen McCullagh, as you said, has pleaded not guilty. He is presented in court each day. He is flanked by 2 custody sergeants, and he remains there throughout this evidence. So Dr. Linus was very methodical as he went through bit by bit the injuries that Natalie had sustained. We already had an idea of how she had died, but this was the first time we had heard from the post-mortem exactly what injuries she had sustained, and they were numerous. And so he started by saying that she had 3 stab wounds to her neck. One of those had contact with the jugular vein, and that would have meant she would have bled rapidly and would have caused her death without prompt medical treatment. He also said that there were 2 other wounds that would have bled briskly, and all the wounds not requiring more than a moderate degree of force to inflict. Dr. Linus said she had also suffered from neck compression. There were signs of fingerprints on one side of her neck, and on the other side of the neck it showed signs of either that a ligature had been used, or that there had been compression while there was clothing in the way, or at one point he actually said a silver dog bowl, which was found in the house, could have been pushed against her neck, but he couldn't be sure what had caused those marks on her neck for sure. He also then said she had suffered blunt force trauma to her head, and he outlined those injuries. And then he said that there was bruising to the back of one of her hands, and this was consistent with her having thrown a punch, so defended herself, defensive injuries. He was questioned by Mr. McCullagh's barrister, John Kearney KC, and he said he wouldn't be able to say at the time of the attack whether Ms McNally was upright or whether she was lying down. And he was unable to determine the exact position that the attacker might have been at the time of the incident. He said that, this wasn't TV, which was his exact words, this was real life, and that this was as much information as he could possibly provide. It was very, very detailed. And if you can imagine, there's a jury, there's 6 men, 6 women, and they're looking at the state pathologist as he's given his evidence from the witness box. And what he did, I suppose, to show them is, as he was describing the injuries, he was pointing to that position on his body. So he was saying she received an injury to her, and he would have pointed to that place. So that lasted for, I think, around 40 minutes, his evidence. It was very, as I said, it was lengthy, it was detailed, and he had laid out just the severity of the attack that Ms McNally had suffered. He also spoke about then examining, she was pregnant. As we know, she was 15 weeks pregnant. And he said that it was a male fetus, and that its death, that it had shown no signs of any abnormalities, and that the death was because she had died.
He said, according to the notes I have, that it was difficult to be certain of the exact fatal sequence. There were so many injuries involved. He did say she suffered in this attack as well, which is something that I noted. Yeah. And he said that she had inhaled vomit during the attack as well, which is harrowing, to say the least.
Some of the evidence, when you hear it out of sequence, you don't really understand how much sense it makes or why it's being brought up. But what he did say is she had vomited, which shows that she was conscious for a while during this attack. If you're it's your natural gag reflex. She had been sick. There was vomit in her lungs. And there was numerous other injuries that wouldn't have led to her death, but the injuries that she did sustain were so severe that any one of them could have possibly caused her death. So the blunt force trauma could have caused her death, the stabbing could have caused her death, or the strangulation could have caused her death.
Prior to Dr. Linus giving evidence on the Tuesday, the officer who arrested Stephen McCullagh on suspicion of murder at the scene, he also gave evidence. And again, I have to tell the listener that this also, there are several very disturbing details here.
There were a number of police officers who gave evidence in the morning, and among those were a number of police officers, a sergeant who was stationed in Lurgan. They spoke about getting the emergency call to Silverwood Green, which is where Ms McNally lived. The arresting officer said when he arrested McCullagh, he replied, and we seen the body worn footage of that, so we heard that to the court. He says, "Murder? Why?" And that was his response to being arrested. But we also heard that she was found on the floor. Her house is, and it has had to be explained several times, it was a townhouse. So the garage is the ground floor and a room. And as you walk in, you go upstairs, and her living area is on the first floor. She was lying with her head into the living room, and her feet were sort of slightly overhanging the top stair. All described a lot of blood. There was a Christmas tree had been toppled onto its side. That the small knife that we discussed, that we're going to discuss, which was shown today in evidence, that there was a knife lying on the floor, that there was a smear of blood on one of the walls, and that there was a lot of blood in and around Ms McNally's body. And there was also a dog bowl, which the officer said looked almost as though it had been used to collect blood. There was so much blood in this dog bowl.
And he said he quickly established a crime scene, that is, to prevent contamination of the area. A second PSNI officer also gave evidence that he made contact with a senior inspector. He said to make him aware of the incident. He was told he should treat the incident as murder, and that it was this senior inspector who wasn't at the scene who directed the second officer to arrest Stephen McCullagh on suspicion of murder.
He did. He directed that McCullagh now be arrested on suspicion of murder, and then he contacted Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell to make him aware of the incident, as he would have been the Detective Chief Inspector on duty for that area at that time.
They were shown pictures of the scene taken by a police photographer. We had heard that was going to happen, but Natalie's body was pixelated from these images.
Yeah, the jury were shown them. Her body is in a pixelated area of these pictures, but they were shown them, and then they were also shown a police surveyor who made maps of the layout of the room, where furniture was positioned, where the knife would have been, where the bowl would have been, where Ms McNally would have been, and those maps then were also shown to the jury.
A so-called YouTube live, that's where people are supposedly live streaming on YouTube rather than uploading a pre-recorded video. That's what it's supposed to be. And this, and we're calling it so-called YouTube live, was played to the jury on Wednesday.
So before that, a detective sergeant gave evidence, and that was to produce 3 exhibits which were shown to the jury. If you've never been in a court, it means these exhibits are placed inside evidence bags and they're held up, and then they're shown to the jury. Among them was a small black-handled knife the police believe may have been used in the attack on Ms McNally. There was also that dog bowl that we spoke about earlier, which was shown to the jury. And then there was a diabetes information sheet, a sheet that would have told you what to do if someone who was diabetic went into hypo. It wasn't actually clear why that was being shown to the jury at that time, but it will become clear as the day's evidence goes on. And then after that, we were shown about an hour and a half split, because there was a small gap for lunch to allow the jury to take a comfort break. But we were shown about an hour and a half of what was said to be a 6-hour gaming stream that McCullagh originally claimed he was live streaming on the night that Ms McNally died. So the sequence is, we know that she had stayed the night in McCullagh's house in Lisburn. We seen footage from a neighbour's CCTV cameras which showed her leaving his house at around 1 p.m. She then messages him on WhatsApp, and they're in contact throughout the day. She goes home and has a shower and changes clothes, and she goes to her parents' house where she has Sunday dinner and watches the World Cup final. And throughout that, she is messaging McCullagh back and forward about what's happening in the football. At that stage, when the football match is over, she heads back to her home, which is very close distance to where her parents lived, and said about how she wanted to go walk her dog. So her dog River was with her, and she wanted to take that for a walk. At this stage, there's still messages going back and forward between the two. 2 hours before this, Stephen McCullagh had posted on social media that he had decided he was going to do a live stream starting at 6 p.m. And that live stream was called the Violent Night Christmas Live Gaming Stream. So he told Natalie McNally that he had just decided that he was going to do this live stream. About a minute before 6 p.m, just before that, he messages her saying, off to live stream the night away. She messaged him back saying, good luck, I might have a peek during the night. So what the jury were then told by the prosecution is they were shown receipts for 2 games that were purchased in a gaming store in Lisburn. One was a Grand Theft Auto Xbox game. And then they were also shown receipts for alcohol that he had purchased in an off-licence close to his home where he lived in Lisburn. We were then shown an hour and a half of this, including the intro. And during this, it's very clear that Stephen McCullagh wants anyone watching this to believe it's live. So he goes, welcome to my live stream. And then he talks about how he's
Because it wasn't live.
It was not live. And he later admits that it isn't live. But he talks about how this was live, but that he's having technical problems. My computer's really old, he says. It needs replaced. And as a result of that, I will not be able to interact with the chat during this live. But he says repeatedly that it is live. It is a live stream.
And what exactly is it for the listener? What did you see today?
Look, listen, this is something that I think is for people much younger than me. But what happened is he played Grand Theft Auto. You can see him in a window, in a box in the corner. He is wearing a Santa hat and he is speaking throughout this. In a larger box, you see the screen that he is playing with the game, Grand Theft Auto playing, and him playing it. And it is a very rowdy experience. He shouts, he screams, he shouts at characters on the game. He speaks, he swears a lot. It's a very swear. There's a lot of sexual references throughout it. And this is something that he was known for. He was a YouTube live streamer, so people would have tuned in to watch him. He says during this that he's going to have a drink, and you can see him pouring himself a Guinness. And he says then, I've just realised that I'm going to drink drive. And then he says, not really, just in the game, because I am not leaving the house tonight. And this is all part of what the prosecution were showing to the jury. Because McCullagh was arrested. McCullagh the next night then goes to Natalie's house, and there's a build up to that. So then we are read messages that he had sent to Natalie. So he finishes playing this game, which he claimed was live, but we now know was pre-recorded. And just after that, his devices are not active during this 6-hour window. And just after that, he messages Natalie McNally's phone to say that he had finished live streaming and said, hope you have plenty of peaks, although not while I was necking Guinness and Baileys. Because what we were told is that he had promised her, because she was pregnant and couldn't drink alcohol, that he wouldn't drink alcohol for the duration of her pregnancy. He then sends WhatsApp messages to a friend called Anne, and there's an exchange between the two of them, and those messages then continue the next day. So the next day we read a series of messages that he was sending to Natalie McNally's phone, saying a lot of them, good morning. And then as the day goes on, he said, are you angry at me? And I apologise. I broke my promise. I won't do that again. He tells her he loves her. This goes on throughout the day. She's not responding. He then starts messaging a friend, Anne, and he says the same thing to her. I think Natalie isn't speaking to me because I had a drink. She says, apologise, you broke your promise, apologise to her. And then this goes on, and then he says he's working a shift, and when he finishes, because she's pregnant and diabetic, he's now worried about her, and he's going to go and check on her after work. And he asks his friend Anne, will she go with him? And she responds to say that she would, but she has other plans that evening. And he tells her, I'm going to go and check on her, and I have a diabetes information sheet with me. That's in case he is telling her she is taking a hypo and he's very concerned. He then goes to the house, and we know then, from the previous day's evidence, he rings 999 and everything that happens after that. But what the prosecution case is this is all part of an elaborate alibi.
This information, this evidence, has been presented to the court by the prosecution, to be clear.
The defence have not let out their case yet, so
they
we've
have
only
not
heard
let,
the
so we
prosecution
have
case.
to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
And we have to be very clear also that Stephen McCullagh denies the charge against him. So we've been very, very clear. We've heard little from, if anything at all, from the defence.
Yeah,
so
his defence has queried a few things along the way, but this is the prosecution's case that we're hearing, and they're laying this out. They have previously claimed in the opening that this was all part of an elaborate hoax, an alibi to try and claim not just to Ms McNally, but to other people that he was live streaming. Originally, when he was arrested on the night that he reported, he rang 999, the emergency services came. As we have told, he was arrested on the night. We have heard from the officer who arrested him. He was held until the next day and then he was released. And at that time, police within days said he wasn't a suspect because of the live stream and the fact that his phone and car had not left his house during this period of time when they believe Natalie was murdered. They then obviously have cyber experts look at this, and the prosecution has said that then they will then show that it isn't. But that is not in contention because Stephen McCullagh then provided a written statement during the second time that he was arrested where he admitted that it wasn't live streaming. But again, he said that he had told Natalie he wouldn't drink alcohol and he wanted to drink, and he had been drinking and sleeping throughout most of the night.
What's coming up tomorrow?
Tomorrow we are going to hear evidence from the cyber expert who is going to go through the live stream and explain when and how that was recorded. And we're also going to hear, I think, other technical evidence, because bear in mind, this is a very technical case. So we're going to hear from the PSNI cyber security expert tomorrow. It's a 5-week trial sitting in front of Mr. Justice Kinney, who is running a very tight ship, I have to say. And at this stage, we know that Natalie McNally's parents and brothers have been attending each day. As I said, Stephen McCullagh is presented each day. There's a lot more evidence to come. And as you said, we are presenting this as it happens. And so right now we've only heard the prosecution, but we must bear in mind that there is still the defence case to come after this.
Allison Morris, thank you very much.